It is the golden age of Greece, a unique window of time that gives birth to Western ideals of beauty, science, art, and a radical new form of government: democracy. To immortalize those ideals, the Greeks build what will become the very symbol of Western civilization: the Parthenon.
It was the physical embodiment of their values, their beliefs, of their ideology. It remains for us a powerful statement of what human beings are capable of.
And although the Parthenon appears to be geometrically straight and made from interchangeable parts, subtle curves make each piece unique, varying by fractions of a millimeter.
The quality of the engineering work and the precision is unmatched, even from us today.
Peering over the rooftops of modern Athens, from its throne atop the ancient Acropolis, the sacred city in the sky, the Parthenon rules in shimmering splendor. Even in its present form, a stark marble ruin, the Parthenon is revered as an icon of Western civilization. Its shapely, muscular columns, crowned with majestic capitals, are the very symbol of the classical world. Its height and width define perfect proportions. Its original sculptures have been looted and lusted after for their beauty. And if imitation is the sincerest form of flattery, the Parthenon reigns as the most copied building in the world. From the French Parliament to the US Supreme Court, to banks, museums, and countless buildings that aspire to convey wealth, culture, and power.
The Parthenon remains an enduring symbol. It was built to glorify Athens, but has taken on a much greater meaning. Despite the destructions of time and man, it still represents the highest level of human creativity.
But as magnificent as the Parthenon is today, it is a shadow of its former self. 2,500 years ago, the Parthenon was built as the crowning achievement of classical Greece. It towered on the Acropolis, at the center of a complex of temples and altars, vividly painted and adorned with statues of mortal and immortal greats. The most prominent sculpture stood inside, a 40-foot-high gold and ivory statue of Athena Parthenos, the patron goddess of Athens.
It's high.
Kores and his team have investigated every angle on the Parthenon. And although the building looks straight, they've discovered there's barely a straight line on it. These curves are no accident. They start with the foundation, or stylobate. Each of the 46 columns has a gently curving profile and leans inward. Even the architraves, marble beams that span the columns, as well as the architectural elements above them, are curved. This means that each of the over 70,000 pieces of the Parthenon is unique and fits in only one place. And the difficulty of fitting the pieces back together is compounded by the Parthenon's history. Since it was built in the 5th century BCE, it has been shot at, exploded, set on fire, rocked by earthquakes, converted to a church, then a mosque, and in the 19th century, looted for its magnificent sculptures. The Parthenon is a 20,000-ton, 70,000-piece, three-dimensional jigsaw puzzle. And worse, it's a puzzle that doesn't include instructions. No one has found anything resembling architectural. How did the ancient Athenians build the Parthenon with such precision in less than 9 years? And why with these subtle curves and few right angles?
The Parthenon was the greatest monument and the greatest sanctuary in the greatest city of classical Greece. Their ideologies, it was as much a temple to Athens and the Athenians as it is to their patron goddess, Athena Parthenos.
But just 30 years before it was built, Athens lay in ruins. A victim of Emperor Xerxes, leader of Greece's traditional enemy, Persia. The Athenians rally the rest of the Greek city-states and, with a series of heroic military victories, drive out the Persian invaders. With the foreign threat neutralized and nearly 200 cities across the Aegean paying into a mutual defense fund, Athens grows wealthy. It's now 450 BCE, and a former general emerges as leader, Pericles. He spearheads an ambitious campaign to rebuild Athens and ushers in the golden age of Greece. A unique window of time that establishes Western ideals of beauty, science, art, and a radical new form of government. Demos, meaning people, and kratos, power, people power, or democracy.
5th century Athens was a golden age because of the constellation of powerful intellects who gathered there.
Socrates studies philosophy here. Hippocrates, considered the founder of modern medicine, according to later traditions, visited Athens. Herodotus, father of history, and Thucydides write detailed accounts of this time.
Theater especially flourished. And this was a time of Sophocles and Euripides performing their wonderful plays to the public in these theaters, including this particular one, the Theater of Dionysus, on the south slope of the Acropolis.
But while all of Athens flourishes, the Acropolis still lay in ruins from the Persian invasion. Then, in 449 BCE, Pericles proposes to rebuild the temples destroyed by the Persians. He opens the question to debate.
Every monument, every element of the Periclean building program had to be voted upon so that these monuments would in fact be monuments of the democracy and not of one man, such as Pericles himself.
In a powerful statement of their self-confidence, the people of Athens vote to rebuild the Acropolis. And at its center, a building to embody their ideals. The Parthenon. The Parthenon would be the largest building in the world constructed and translates visual information, like converging lines, to help us assess distance and relative size. But sometimes something's lost in translation. Here, the converging lines are telling us that the line on the right is taller than the line on the left. The result, an optical illusion.
This is another classical illusion. If you have two straight lines, if you add converging lines, these two lines seem to bow in the middle. So if the floor of the Parthenon has converging cues as to depth and perspective, you could have an illusory sag in the floor of the Parthenon.
Perhaps to compensate for the illusory sag, the builders left extra marble in the middle. The ancient Greeks realized that to construct a building that appears perfect, they would have to come up with a design that tricks the eye. What they invent is a system of optical refinements.
Their concern was the visual perfection of the building.
That distance is at one at the same time 45 Doric feet, that's the ruler on the relief. It's also 48 common feet, which is the foot imprint, and it's 50 ionic feet, all at the same time. And these are quite exact correspondences.
So the Salamis stone may have provided a simple way for ancient workers from different places to calibrate their rulers and cross-reference different units of measurement. But the Salamis stone may also be a clue to how the ancient Greeks were using the human body to create what we now regard as ideal proportions.
What's extraordinary about this is that at the same time as being a practical device, it's also a kind of model of theory, architectural theory. That a perfect ideal human body designed by nature is a kind of paradigm for how architects should design temples.
Among the first to record that Greek temples were based on the ideal human body was the Roman architect Marcus Vitruvius. He studied the proportions of temples like the Parthenon in the 1st century BCE.
To understand the system of proportions of the Parthenon.
According to Vitruvius, Greek architects believed in an objective basis of beauty that mirrors the proportions of an ideal human body. They observed, among many examples, that the span from fingertip to fingertip is a fixed ratio to total height. And height is a fixed ratio to the distance between the navel and the foot. 2,000 years after the Parthenon, another artist was also searching for an objective basis of beauty.
This is a very famous image. It's drawn by Leonardo da Vinci in the Renaissance, and it's based on Vitruvius' description of the ideal human body, and it encapsulates this idea of its theoretical importance. And what's really interesting for us is that when we superimpose the Salamis relief on this drawing, we see that there's a remarkable correspondence. There are differences, but it's the same principle. You have the same interest in the anthropomorphic principle of giving a kind of sacred, fundamental justification for these measures.
Da Vinci's ideal Renaissance man famously stands in a circle surrounded by a square. Da Vinci named this image Vitruvian Man, after the Roman architect. The ratio of the radius of the circle to a side of the square is 1 to 1.6. That ratio is sometimes attributed to the Greek mathematician Pythagoras, who lived 100 years before the building of the Parthenon. In the Victorian age, it became known as the golden ratio. It was a mathematical formula for beauty. For centuries, many scholars believed the golden ratio gave the Parthenon its tremendous power and perfect proportions. Most notably, the ratio of height to width on its facades is a golden ratio. The height of the facade to its width.
The Parthenon, like a statue, exemplifies a certain symmetry, a certain harmony of part to part and of part to the whole. There's no question that the harmony of the building, which is clearly one of its most visible characteristics, is dependent upon a certain mathematical system of proportions.
For the Greeks, there was nothing better than a design based on the coming together of measures, of proportions and harmonies and shapes. It's rather like an orchestrated piece of music in which the harmonies of the various instruments are sort of fused together in a wonderful, glorious, orchestrated symphony.
With something like the Salamis stone's use of the human body as units of measure and the idealized human form to define perfect proportions, the Parthenon literally embodies the words of the Greek philosopher Protagoras, who lived in Athens during the construction of the Parthenon. Man is the measure of all things. But proportions and principles,
the incarnation and so on. But once you've got them established, once you know with these blueprints exactly where you're going, then you can proceed down the length of the building and across the front by repetition. So once they get going, they can get going at considerable speed.
with the discovery of the Didyma plans, the restorers have...
And we will be able to admire the perfect proportions of the Parthenon again.
The Parthenon was completed in 432 BCE. As the ultimate expression of Athenian ideals, the temple is adorned with mythological battles of victory. Justice over injustice, civilization defeating barbarity, order prevailing over chaos. And perhaps for the first time on a Greek temple, the Athenians, mere mortals, depict themselves alongside the gods.
And so if the human beings, if the Athenians on the Parthenon frieze are elevated near the rank of gods, the gods are represented in a way that makes them human. And the difference between gods and mortals, between Athenians and the Olympians, is not one so much of kind as of degree. This is an extremely humanistic way of representing themselves.
But the temple and society that built it would not last. Just 1 year later, Pericles goes to the citizens of Athens for funds to equip an army against the threat of Sparta. To pay for it, he suggests they could, if necessary, strip the gold from the great statue of Athena. Soon after, Pericles and a third of the city die from the plague. Athens is crushed by the Spartans, who turn the Parthenon into an army barracks. For the next 2 millennia, the Parthenon would be abused by Romans, barbarians, Christians, Muslims, Turks, with the final insult coming in the 18th and 19th centuries, when Europeans rediscover classical Greece and, out of reverence, plunder much of its remaining sculptures. The most famous of which, the Elgin marbles, are in the British Museum to this day. When the Acropolis restoration project began over 30 years ago, Manolis Korres and his colleagues could have chosen to restore the Parthenon to its original state, adorned with sculpture and friezes painted in vivid colors. Instead, they chose to preserve what has survived these 2,500 years. A majestic ruin, a witness to what we needlessly destroy, and the beauty and perfection that we can create.